So, late September 2025, Argentina wasn't just volatile, it was genuinely scary.
I thought absolutely terrifying. After President Milei's party suffered that really severe political defeat in the Buenos Aires provincial election,
Yeah.
the market reaction was just, well, immediate
Yeah.
and brutal.
How brutal are we talking here?
Investors just fled. Argentina's central bank, the BCRA, they had to burn through more than $1.1 billion.
Billion with a B.
Yeah, of their foreign reserves they barely even had to begin with.
And just 3 days.
3 days, just desperately trying to keep the peso from completely imploding.
Wow. That signals, what, total loss of control?
Pretty much. And you could see that panic reflected perfectly in the country risk index. It spiked towards an alarming 1,500 basis points.
Okay, for those listening who maybe aren't deep in bond markets, what does 1,500 basis points actually mean?
It means Argentina's borrowing cost was roughly 15 percentage points higher than safe U.S. Treasury bills. Essentially, nobody would lend to them. They were completely locked out of global credit, looking default right in the face.
Sounds like a full-blown geopolitical emergency in the making.
Exactly.
But then, almost like flipping a switch, the whole narrative changed. The U.S. steps in.
Right. The U.S. announced this massive, multi-part financial support package. And the centerpiece, a really stunning $20 billion currency swap line.
And the market reaction.
Immediate.
Yeah.
Dramatic. Confidence surged back just like that. The peso actually appreciated 2.4%. Argentine bond prices jumped up.
So this wasn't just, some technical adjustment. This felt different.
Oh, absolutely. This was a major strategic move. It had foreign policy written all over it.
The scale of it, and maybe more importantly, who is driving it?
Yeah, that's what makes it stand out. It
Yeah.
feels less like your typical IMS stabilization plan.
Right.
And much more like a high-stakes, politically driven intervention.
Welcome to Nation State Podcast.
Join us as we dive into the latest headlines, breaking stories, and critical events shaping America and the world.
From politics to culture, from the economy to technology, we analyze the news that matters most.
And today we're doing a deep dive into this whole situation, looking at the reports detailing this U.S. intervention in Argentina.
Our mission, really, is to figure out why this move, which was led by U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, seems so explicitly designed to counter China's financial influence there.
Exactly. And what does this $20 billion lifeline truly represent? Is it, a genuine bridge to get Argentina back on stable ground?
Or is it maybe just a temporary anesthetic, something to tide things over until those critical October 26th midterm elections?
Let's dig into the crisis that made this whole thing necessary in the first place.
Okay, so to really grasp how fragile things were, we need to look back at Milei's radical reforms, his shock therapy, since late 2023.
Right. And financially, he did achieve something pretty remarkable. He managed to erase a fiscal deficit that was over 4% of GDP.
In just a year, that's a huge fiscal turnaround.
It is huge, absolutely. But, and this is the crucial part, it came at an enormous human cost. And that's where the political instability comes from.
The austerity must have been brutal.
Relentless. The reports highlight the pain, especially the staggering 36% year-over-year cut in pensions, in real terms.
Ooh, you cut spending like that deep, that fast?
Yeah, you're almost guaranteed a major political backlash.
And that backlash arrived in September 2025. That severe defeat in Buenos Aires province wasn't just a loss, it was seen as a rejection of his whole mandate.
Which caused investors to just run for the exits.
And then on top of that, you had this growing corruption scandal involving his closest advisor, Karina Milei. Talk about pouring fuel on the fire.
Right. And this kind of political shock hits Argentina so much harder than other countries because it's just structurally so fragile.
You mean its history?
Exactly. We're talking about a country that's defaulted on its sovereign debt 9 times. 9. And average inflation between 1944 and 2023 was, wait for it, 190%.
190% average inflation. It's hard to even comprehend that level of instability.
It breeds zero trust in the local currency.
And none whatsoever.
So it becomes what they call a dual currency economy. The peso is, just for daily transactions maybe. But the U.S. dollar, that's the only thing people trust as a store of value.
So when the government desperately needed dollars to defend the peso back in September,
they had almost nothing. The reports underscore how grim the starting point was. The central bank's net international reserves were already deep in the negative, less than -$11 billion before Milei even took office.
They were trying to defend the currency with empty pockets, essentially.
Pretty much. Which leads us straight to this U.S. Lifeline package.
The cornerstone being that $20 billion currency swap line. Can you break down what exactly a swap line is for our listeners and why it's such a potent tool?
Sure. So a currency swap line, in simple terms, it's like a reciprocal agreement. The U.S. Treasury agrees to temporarily swap U.S. dollars for Argentine pesos with Argentina's central bank, the BCRA. This instantly gives the BCRA a big pile of U.S. dollar liquidity, actual cash, which they can then use to intervene in the market, defend the peso, pay for critical imports, whatever's needed to restore confidence.
Without having to borrow at those astronomical rates we mentioned.
Exactly. It bypasses the broken credit market.
And how unusual is it for something like this size, to be announced so publicly? Not by the central banks quietly, but by Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, reportedly after a call between Presidents Trump and Milei at the UN? That sounds like a political statement.
Oh, it's entirely a political statement. It's broadcasting that strong alliance loud and clear.
But the mechanics behind it are also interesting, right? It's not just the swap line.
No, it's a multi-pronged approach. The Treasury also signaled it's ready to buy Argentine government bonds, either existing ones or potentially new issues.
But there's a catch.
A big one. Only after the October 26 election, and only if the result is favorable for Milei.
Conditional support. And then there's this other mechanism involved, the Exchange Stabilization Fund, the ESF. What is that?
Ah, the ESF. This is where it gets really interesting institutionally. It's basically the Treasury Secretary's own discretionary pool of assets.
Like a slush fund?
Well, maybe more like the executive branch's emergency financial toolkit. It's incredibly powerful because the Treasury Secretary can deploy these funds for foreign currency operations, like this one, without needing immediate specific approval or money from Congress.
So using the ESF lets the White House act fast and decisively, bypassing some of the usual checks and balances.
Precisely. Turns it into a direct instrument of presidential foreign policy.
And they didn't just offer the money, right? There were strings attached.
Absolutely. The reports are very clear. The U.S. demanded policy changes from Argentina. Specifically, they wanted an end to the tax holiday that let commodity exporters delay converting their dollar earnings back into pesos.
So forcing more dollars into the local system immediately, using financial leverage for policy goals.
Exactly. Get those dollars flowing now.
Okay, let's really pin down this key point for everyone listening. Why is this whole operation being run by the Treasury, using the ESF, and not by the Federal Reserve? Usually when we think global dollar liquidity, we think of the Fed.
And that's the crucial distinction, and it reveals why this is fundamentally political. The Fed has its own swap lines, yes, but they are strictly for countries with very high credit quality. Think Canada, the UK, the Eurozone, Japan.
Places unlikely to default.
Right. Argentina, with its history of 9 defaults, it just doesn't meet the Fed's strict apolitical criteria. The Fed simply can't justify extending a line under its rules. Its hands are tied.
So the Treasury steps in using the ESF. This allows the White House to make a decision that the independent Fed probably wouldn't or couldn't make.
Exactly. It shifts it from a technical central banking decision, which would likely be a no, into a deliberate political and foreign policy choice.
A choice to back a specific political ally.
That's the bottom line here. It's an act of geopolitical support for a very close ally.
And that alliance is incredibly public. Milei has openly embraced Trump's style, even using the MAG slogan in official government communications.
And President Trump, in return, offered what's actually a pretty rare full endorsement for a foreign leader. The personal and ideological bond is strong.
Which brings us to the big strategic driver behind all this.
The China factor.
Right. This U.S. intervention, it looks like classic great power politics playing out in South America. It's explicitly framed as countering China's financial foothold in Buenos Aires.
Yeah, Argentina already has a significant swap line agreement with the People's Bank of China. It's been a crucial source of financing for them.
And the report suggests the U.S. $20 billion line isn't just meant to compete with China's money.
No, it's intended as a replacement. One report we saw stated very bluntly that the cancellation of this China swap is a priority for Washington.
Wow. So the U.S. isn't just offering an alternative. They're actively trying to push China out financially, using this massive support package as leverage.
It turns U.S. financial aid into a direct geopolitical weapon against Beijing's influence.
Okay, so this $20 billion bazooka, as some called it, it clearly calmed the markets immediately. The peso stabilized, bond prices recovered, that risk index retreated.
Yes, immediate relief. But it instantly sparked this huge debate. Is this a real solution, or is it just, anesthetic? pain relief that doesn't fix the underlying problem.
And the big concern there is moral hazard.
Right, exactly. The worry among many analysts is that by propping up the currency with U.S. taxpayer-backed funds, the intervention might let the Argentine government avoid making tough choices. Specifically, maintaining an exchange rate that's way too strong.
How strong are we talking?
Some estimates suggest the peso might be 30% overvalued compared to where it should be based on economic fundamentals.
And keeping an overvalued currency, that eventually backfires, doesn't it?
It does. It makes your exports too expensive for the world to buy and makes imports artificially cheap, which just worsens the dollar shortage over time. It removes the pressure for a devaluation that, while painful, might be necessary.
And it seems Treasury Secretary Bessent himself basically confirmed they were willing to fight the market, at least temporarily.
Yeah, he was quoted saying the U.S. was not going to let a disequilibrium in the market cause a backup in his substantial economic reforms.
So the priority was clearly political. Keep Milei's reform agenda alive through the election, even if it meant overriding market forces for a while.
Which is where putting this into historical context really helps clarify what's happening. This kind of Treasury-led political intervention isn't entirely new.
You're thinking of the 1994 Mexico tequila crisis rescue.
That's the closest parallel, yes. That followed a pretty similar playbook.
How so?
Well, the 94 Mexico rescue was also fundamentally a Treasury-driven political decision. It used the ESF to stabilize a key strategic neighbor during a crisis. The main goal was preventing economic collapse and political instability right on the U.S. border.
It was controversial at the time, I recall.
Hugely controversial, but ultimately it worked. Mexico stabilized, and they repaid the full $20 billion loan, actually ahead of schedule, by 1997. It really set the modern precedent for the ESF as this independent foreign policy financial tool.
Okay, so that's the 1994 political rescue model. How does that compare to the swap lines we heard so much about during the 2008 global financial crisis?
Completely different situation. Yeah. The 2008 swaps were run by the Federal Reserve, not the Treasury.
Right.
And they were systemic. The goal was to provide emergency dollar liquidity to a whole network of major high credit quality central banks around the world, Europe, Japan, UK, to prevent the entire global financial system from freezing up.
So 2008 was technical, about systemic stability, targeting strong economies.
Exactly. It wasn't about rescuing one specific, politically allied, lower credit quality nation like Argentina. That's the 94 model.
So putting it all together, this 2025 Argentina package looks like the 1994 political bailout playbook.
But now explicitly layered with this element of great power competition against China.
It really highlights how financial tools are becoming increasingly politicized as foreign policy weapons today.
Absolutely. And this very political nature hasn't gone unnoticed back in the U.S., has it?
No, it definitely stirred up controversy in Washington, especially among Democrats.
Right. Lawmakers like Senator Elizabeth Warren were quite critical. She called the intervention deeply troubling.
Her main objections seem to be using these significant emergency funds, the ESF, essentially to prop up the currency of a foreign government, seemingly for political reasons.
That's the core of the criticism, yeah. Is this really about U.S. financial stability or global stability? Yeah. Or is it an electorally timed bailout for a leader who happens to align ideologically with the current administration?
And the fate of this entire massive package, all this financial maneuvering, it all hangs on one date.
October 26th, the midterm elections in Argentina. Everything hinges on that outcome.
What happens if Milei's coalition doesn't do well, if they suffer another setback?
Well, the risk is huge. The U.S. support is conditional on a favorable outcome. If that doesn't happen, the stabilization could just evaporate. Analysts pointed out there seems to be, quote, no plan for the day after. A bad result for Milei. The U.S. seems all in on him winning.
But if he does win, or his coalition performs strongly,
then the reward potentially is that the stabilization package stays in place. And maybe, just maybe, that promised wave of foreign direct investment from U.S. companies actually materializes.
Which could finally help translate this temporary financial stability into actual sustainable economic growth. Although, even the optimists seem cautious.
Right. The OECD had already trimmed its growth forecast for Argentina slightly, even with the potential aid, down from 5.2% to 4.5%. So it's not a magic bullet even if Milei wins.
So what does this all really boil down to for you, our listener? The U.S. has flexed its considerable financial power to shield a key ideological partner in a strategically important region.
But that shield comes with big political strings attached. It's explicitly tied to an election result and explicitly aimed at countering China. It reinforces this trend of finance becoming a primary tool in geopolitical contests.
Which leaves us with a really provocative question to think about. In this era of rising great power competition, is a country's actual creditworthiness still the most important factor in getting major international financial help?
Or has strategic geopolitical alignment, being on the right side, now become the ultimate deciding factor for who gets a $20 billion lifeline, regardless of their balance sheet?
Something definitely worth considering.
Indeed.
You've been listening to NationScope podcast, where we analyze the stories shaping America and the world. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.